Happy Easter. I hope you've enjoyed your sunrise services, of course, probably via online. I hope you've enjoyed your church services if you're seeing it after that. Enjoyed our virtual community of faith that we are doing right now. And one day we'll be back together to have that real life community with one another. And this is Easter. And I love the fact that people have been saying, hope isn't canceled. Easter isn't canceled. We may not be able to have our normal worship services in a building together as people, but we are able to be the people of God together, whether we're virtually together or physically together. So happy Easter. The resurrection of Jesus Christ vanquished death and gave humanity the confidence of eternity. All things were restored. Here Jesus has been worshiped and sung praises to on Sunday. He's went through this week of Holy Week with all of its ups and downs and twists and turns, which leads to a treacherous Friday where he is convicted and crucified on a cross. On Saturday, he lays in a tomb, dead. And his closest followers are truly saddened. They're sad. They have lost their friend. They've lost their mentor, their rabbi, their teacher, their leader, and their promise. I mean, this was the guy that was going to take them all the way to leading the world again like they had hoped that they would one day do. And none of that's happened. Can you imagine putting all your hope into one bucket and the bucket being destroyed, and now you have nothing? This is where they are. Easter, the resurrection, changes that narrative. The narrative that happened all day Saturday and all day Friday, where his closest followers, his apostles, and the many disciples outside of them were just crushed in their hearts. Easter changes that. In one day, in one morning, all things change. And I believe that all things are restored. Resurrection is the moment that assures us that all of creation, from that point of when Jesus was resurrected until time ends, whenever that may be, that our God is the one and only God. God said in the original 10 Commandments, "You shall have no other gods before me. I am the only God." And why it took this to prove it, I guess because of our humanity. But God proves it in this moment. Yes, I have died and I have risen. And I've done it on my own because I am God, the one and only. And Jesus wants this news, and it is news. At this moment, it is brand new news. Jesus wants this news to get out and to not be hidden. Can you recall all the times in Scripture and the Gospels when Jesus actually said, "Oh, don't go and tell this. Oh, don't go and say this. Oh, don't tell him I did this. Don't mention me." Or when he said things in parables or what they might even consider riddles, where nothing was said straightforward. Well, Jesus has changed. The message is out now. Isn't that interesting? Like, you would think that if it's one of your most important things in your life, that's what you want said. So he heals lepers, but that's not the most important thing. He casts demons out of a man in a graveyard, but that's not the most important thing. He fed 5,000 people, just men, really, and then the women and the children, but that wasn't the most important thing. And being a sacrifice for all of humanity and all of creation wasn't the most important thing. although it's like top on the list. The most important thing is that Jesus rose from the dead. And I mean, that is Easter. That's the Easter story, that Jesus rises. I mean, can any other God say that they've died and risen up again to live life? And he was fully human again and fully divine all at one moment. But you cannot destroy the ultimate creator. He created it all, and he will not be destroyed by it. He will not be given over to death. Death did not defeat him. Satan did not defeat him. Evil did not win. God vanquished all of that and gave humanity, and really all of creation, the confidence to move forward in the fact that we live in the resurrection. And the rest of time is to be lived for this moment. We don't live to teach about Jesus. We don't live to be healers of other people. We don't even live to liberate the oppressed and the poor. And we really don't live to die a sacrificial death. We live to rise up as restored creation. All of these things, healing, teaching, liberation, and death, only make sense because of the resurrection. Everything Jesus did only makes sense because he rose from the dead. Listen to the words of John as he talks about how Jesus is discovered as resurrected. In John chapter 20, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, which happens to be John, the writer, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. And Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. So at this moment, Mary Magdalene knows. Peter, well, she sort of knows. She knows that he's not there anymore. Peter and John have witnessed that he's not in the tomb anymore. Let's keep going. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Later on, he appears to the disciples. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed his hands and his side. Then Thomas wasn't in the crowd, so Thomas wants to get in on the action. So later on in verse 24, now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples. And they said, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nails and marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, they were in the house again, and Jesus appeared. Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus wanted the word out. He didn't want there to be any kind of confusion. He did not want there to be any resistance. He wanted them to tell. If there was any time to tell anything, it was now. It was now the time to talk about him rising from the dead, because you can tell them about the teachings. You can tell others about the healings. You can tell others about liberating oppressed people, touching lepers, exorcising demons. You can tell them everything about that, and you can tell them about his death. But it means nothing without the resurrection. And so Jesus wants them to know the resurrection, because he wants them to know what it means to have all of this life that they've been given. All of this that's been given, all of creation lives for the resurrection. He lives again. Jesus lives again so that every fiber of life, every atom, every molecule, every little piece of life that builds into something bigger is worthy. And isn't that beautiful news? So today, I want to encourage you, live the resurrected life, so that all that you teach and all that you say and all of your actions and all of the times that you liberate somebody or help somebody or serve somebody, for all of that, so that it makes sense. So that when you give out life through all those things, you're actually giving life. So today, live the resurrected life. Because when you live the resurrected life and give meaning to all of life, you are part of restoring all of creation. And it will be fully restored when he comes again. And so we live the resurrection life because we were created to be this way. We were created to live the resurrected life. We don't live in the doom and the gloom of sin or death. Death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? Well, it's nowhere, because we live resurrected lives. And so we live in joy and peace and love and hope and faith and life. Now, it doesn't mean that our lives will not have trouble. They will. They will at every turn. But we go through those struggles, those trials, those temptations, those troubles, because we know that after them we rise again. We rise again on this earth, and in the end, we rise again with him in eternity, and we come into this world the way it is now and see it a whole new way, a resurrected creation, a renewed creation, a completely restored creation where we're all made perfect, not just humanity, but all of creation. Oh, this is my encouragement to you this week, is to live the resurrected life and have joy and faith in it, and to be brought to joy and be brought up to rising up out of the ashes and into his glorious realm. That is our narrative. That is our story. That is the God we serve. That is the life we live. Happy Easter. Embrace it and enjoy every bit of it. And I'll see you soon.